David Brill, congratulations on your Order of Australia award. What does it mean to you to have your work recognised in that way?
Well, obviously, Natasha, it is a tremendous honour. Not many people behind the scenes get these, and I accept it, and I say this very sincerely on behalf of a lot of my colleagues, cameramen, cinematographers, sound recorders, editors, people you don't hear a lot about. I get the medal, but the medal should go to a lot of other people as well because of what they do.
The southern districts of Tasmania are turned into scorched battlefields.
In 1967, David Brill was a young cameraman working at the ABC in Hobart when he captured dramatic footage of the devastating Black Tuesday bushfires. Years later, he told Australian Story of the ethical conflict he felt doing his job that day.
I was pretty young. I felt very guilty and ashamed that here I am with a camera, like on a Sunday picnic. And at one stage I said, blow this, I throw the camera down and said, can I help? Come on. I'd go in there and drag a bit of furniture out. It was only when that film was set all around the world and people realised what was going on in Tasmania, that a lot of aid came in, started to realise that, golly, this can be so powerful if it's used the right way.
50 years on, what from that experience stays with you and how did it shape your career?
Obviously, that was a huge, big story. But it also taught me, looking back on it, about dealing with people. To me, it's people. That's what it's always fascinated me. It's people. People, if you do a good story on it and you have people related to it, people can relate to that because we're all people with similar feelings and so on. And it was the next thing I did that really clinched me for what I wanted to go on, if I could. The biggest story in the world at that time was Vietnam, which affected everybody. And so obviously I wanted to go to Vietnam, as was the biggest news story. And I was lucky enough to go and work on Four Corners, as one of the great loves of my life in those days. So Mike Willesee and I and Rob Sloss, our sound recordist, we were given the opportunity to go to Vietnam quite a few times, where we had the time to really explain, not just in a news clip. We had an hour if we wanted it, or at least 30 minutes on Four Corners to explain what was going on. It's all very well. If you go to war, of course, you've got to cover gunfire. I mean, that's what war's about. But to me, there are more important things than just going out to a battlefield and covering action. It's what the guns do and to people. And that's what I try to get through with Mike in our stories, the human consequence of war. And on the outskirts of Saigon one day at this makeshift hospital, well, it was a reasonable hospital, but it had been rocketed a few times, and this little girl who was 7 was being brought into this hospital on her grandmother's back. And she had one leg. Her leg was blown off in crossfire when she was 3. Her parents, I think, had been killed in the war. Her brothers and sisters were nowhere to be seen. She was the most beautiful child that I'd ever seen, to me then. I was about 24. And she kept staring at me. I think it was more staring at this camera, whatever this thing was. But it really upset me because I thought to myself, what has she done? What has this little girl done? And I thought, wow, this is to me, this is more powerful, this segment, than the guns going off. So I built this up of her coming in, sitting on the bench, the leg being tried on her, and I just creeped in with the zoom, just a very slow move in to her face, and held it. And then we cut to other shots of her walking along with holding onto the bars, and I looked at that, and when that segment went to air, we had so many phone calls into Four Corners and so many letters. And the people who came up to me and said, what are we doing in Vietnam? And that's the sort of thing that's really stuck with me throughout my life. It's not work, it's more than work because of the power of good television, the power of the ABC. Thank God we've got SBS and the ABC, and that's what's driven me till this day, 50 years later.
Mortars and rockets were hitting the perimeter of the airstrip. David Brill kept on filming as babies were pulled into the aircraft by their arms, legs and necks.
When you would approach a shoot, how would you go about finding that that really powerful human element?
Well, I can give you an example. For the last 10 years, I've been working with Dateline at SBS as a video journalist. The last story I did was a woman who's nearly in her late 70s. She saw on television about 20 years ago how the Cambodians were getting these bears, their stomachs being cut open, the bile being taken out as a medicine. And they'd cut the baby bears' paws off and put them into soup as delicacies. And she was absolutely horrified by this. So she went up to Cambodia and set up this small NGO about 15 years ago. It's now got hundreds or a couple of hundred people working for it in Vietnam, Cambodia and Laos. And I put the idea up in one of our meetings and they said, yes, go and do it. I met her at the airport, sat down with her and said, this is what I'd like to do, and explained it. She could tell that I really cared and passionate, because she has had bad experience with some commercial camera crews, and she was a bit wary. And to top it off, her son, who was going to take it over, he walked out on the streets in Phnom Penh and was killed by a car. So as the days went on, I got to know her. I didn't rush in to do any filming, just to get that confidence going. That's the beaut thing we have on those programs, just a little bit of time to do this. So when I started filming with a small little camera, which I love, the camera's part of me, it's my heart and my soul and my head. It's just a tool of trying to get the message out. And it makes for a better story, because I got her confidence and she trusted me. And I could even ask her, I got to the stage where I said, now your son was killed, because I was warned, don't ask her about that. But I did ask her beforehand if I could talk about it, and because she had a bit of respect for me by this stage, it made it a lot easier, and it was an important part of the story. And that story was put in for the United Nations Peace Award, up against a big one that Kerry O'Brien had done on Clive James, and me and my producer Jeff Parrish went down to the awards in Melbourne and put them on the screen. I thought, golly, we're never going to win against these big ones. Well, blow me dead, they called out our names, or my name, and we won, because I think it was because of that personal approach, that it was very, very personal to get the best out of this woman.
What advice would you give journalists and cameramen and women working in the field today?
Passion and enthusiasm, and really, really get passionate about it and care about the subjects. Not just another story. Every story is important, particularly on public broadcasting. You know, it's something that television, online, all this stuff is very powerful. It's like a magnet. And it's our responsibility to try to show it as truthfully, as caring as you can. What I try to do, Natasha, is to get into the soul of the people, which viewers can relate to and say, golly, move them a bit to say, wow, that's interesting, or aren't we lucky? Just explaining and educating. So I'd say to young people, looking back on my life now, do it because you care, not just as a job. I mean, we have wonderful opportunities and wonderful privileges to do this type of work. Never just take the job for granted.